until it waits like 5 minutes. Oh no, okay. Hello. Still relatively new at this, so uh, moving stuff around. Um, I told a couple people that I was going to stream. Oh, you can't see anything. Probably should have checked that first. That's okay. Nope. I'm just actively changing my browser for now. Aha! So you can probably see this. Yes. Okay. So we click it over here. We take this. Hello, Danny. I'm messing around with my settings real quick because it's not. I did not realize that this is not a window that can be captured. Sorry. So spoilers for here. Um. So I'm gonna talk to you a lot because I told one of my friends. Uh. Okay, I'm gonna start from the beginning. So I like talking about a lot of different topics, and I realize how much I like talking to a lot of my friends about whatever is in their field, whatever's in my field, and whatever is not, uh, whatever each person does not necessarily know. So I like filling in gaps in knowledge, right? And I realized a passion of mine to do that a few weeks, not a few weeks, it's been a couple months now. It's a couple months ago, when I was talking about bits. I'm a computer engineer, so I was talking about bits to someone who doesn't do any of that stuff. They're a photographer and all that. They want to know about bit depth, and I start talking about it. And so me even going on Twitch and all that in the first place, I was because I wanted to have some kind of medium to talk about different topics in general, right? I'll save these recordings and all that for myself later on, and it's also for me to uh, get better at presenting because I get nervous. I'm nervous now, and it's just you that I'm talking to, so I'm very introverted, and I'm looking at my face constantly because I see my face and I'm like, ah, oh, that looks nice. Um, so that's why I'm talking in general on these streams about different items. Second thing I want to talk about right quick before I get started and all that, or why I'm doing this, right? So I have meetings with my advisor every couple of weeks, and uh, and we present. Long story short, we present on papers that we read, and uh, excuse me, we read papers and we present on those papers. And I picked one that introduced a sort of chaotic element to it, right? So this is that paper. I uh, I actually have at the bottom of these slides towards the end. This was my original presentation. Like I straight up, this was what I was going to present on that Friday meeting that I usually have, right? It's this paper that I had read and I was going to present on it. And my advisor's like, "Oh, well, I gotta leave in 5 minutes because someone else presented before me." And he was like, and I said, "Okay, so let me give you a quick rundown." And the rundown is, and then I went along it and I started talking about all like five major details. And while I was explaining, he was like, "Okay, next week you're gonna have to talk about chaos because I have no idea what you're talking about." Um, to give you perspective, chaos and all that stuff is not really my specialty or anything. My senior design was in chaos, or chaotic oscillators and all that, which I guess I'm getting ahead of myself by speaking about. Um, so a lot of this is practice for me to talk about this, and I also want to tell y'all about what this is, right? Because I feel like if someone says, "Oh, this is chaos theory," and you're going to go like, "Whoa, that's interesting," right? I feel like that's everyone's draw to it. Don't be nervous. You got this. I'm sure everyone here will be an easy audience. Yes, thank you. You can't tell, but I do like this a lot. So, um, Oh yeah, by the way, I don't know any of these people. These are some random people from Spain who use who do a bunch of things with 5G networks and industrial IoT. Um, so I guess I'll get started. So I made this slide deck very quickly, and threw together a bunch of slides from my previous senior design, and I was actually coding something right before, like 30 minutes before 8 o'clock. Um, and I kind of want to demo that too because I'm like excited. I'm like, oh, cool, I could show this. So about the stream, I want to be relaxed and just talk normally. And if you have questions, please ask me questions. I like questions. Um, and that is basically a summary of what I kind of want to relay. I like Feynman technique, which is essentially you take a seemingly complicated subject and you boil it down to its to simple terms that even a child can understand, and then you relay using those terms, right? Um, so I want to be able to talk to anyone about this topic because I feel like I get lost a lot in details and I ramble a lot. So uh, feel free to go like, oh, you're talking too much about this subject, get to the point, and things like that. I need that sort of criticism moving forward. So I need to get better about presenting while filling in the gaps for layman people, because I interact with a lot of people who are very technical, and a lot of stuff gets missed when we talk about some items. So brief outline, I'm going to talk about that background of chaotic systems themselves, and various applications for them, essentially. Like I said, I quickly made this presentation. It's not very professional at all. It's just me throwing down my thoughts. I actually meant to delete these bullets, so I'm going to do that now because it comes back later. Um, oh no, you're not supposed to see that. That's just doxed myself. It's okay. Um, so usually when people think of chaos, they think of like, oh, it's discord, it's entropy, it's randomness to some scale, something that's unpredictable, something that's, in your face and like very well, not very orderly at all, right? Um, and so I'm kind of here to tell you like that's not necessarily the case. When you Google chaos, I just threw a picture on there. It just says, oh, complete disorder or complete confusion of something, right? And then in the physics portion, that's basically what I'll be talking about is a sort of behavior that's unpredictable, and it looks random, but really it's more so very sensitive to something at the beginning of its lifetime, right? So I'm getting ahead of myself, I feel like. So a sort of background to this is that I'm trying to think. This might this might be not a good way to start off. I'm trying to think right quick. So I will say so. I'll give this background first, I suppose. So in the early 1960s, there was a dude named Edward, and Edward was hired to basically compute a bunch of simulations with the weather because weather is super unpredictable, and everyone wants to predict it for their meteorological studies. So he threw together a big simulation with these computers. It's the 1960s, so those computers occupied giant rooms and punch cards and all that, right? So he threw together a big simulation based off of what, like a dozen variables, complicated variables, where each one was a complicated system. When I say system, linear systems, you probably know, like y equals mx plus b, whatever, right? Multiple variables, so 12 variables altogether in a giant system. And that was really complicated. And also the computers took forever. So he simplified that down to three, I think, variables. And it still took forever. So while he was running all these different simulations, he he ran it a few times and said, "Oh well, this is taking forever. So I'm gonna cut corners here and just start in the middle of my simulation and then just go grab a cup of coffee on the other side of the building." So he did that and he came back after like a few, I actually don't remember how long it was, but he came back after a considerable while. So the second simulation he ran completed, and he saw a completely different outcome, right? He had set these general conditions. Sorry, I'm talking with my cable. He had set all these conditions. I'm saying conditions, but I should say like the values. If you start with x equals 0, and it goes up until like f of x equals, I don't know, 1, right? And he started with x equal zero point 0.5, right? I hope this is making sense. I feel like I'm talking a lot. Um, he he saw that there was a big difference between the original run that he had made, and the second run that he had made, even though what he gave the computer was very close to what it originally had, right? Okay, thank you so much. I'm making total sense. Um, so I'm actually just talking without looking at my slide. So completely different numbers after the time elapsed. The reason for that was because he rounded numbers essentially. He rounded a few numbers, basically rounding like, and those are the exact numbers he rounded. It was 0.506127. He rounded it off by like 3 places, and then he left to get a coffee, and then he came back, and then that was it, right? Um, and that was a huge difference in terms of what he saw. He saw something that I think it was like he expected to see like rainy weather from the original simulation, and then when he came back, it was like a tornado. It was like something completely off, right? He's working in weather science that eventually became our understanding of atmospheric science today, right? I feel like a lot of people go like, "Oh yeah, something small will blow up," basically, and that's a typical understanding of the natural world. But back then, not so much. This was a discovery at that time. So that ties into the next slide, which is the butterfly effect. And everyone's heard of the butterfly effect, right? I forget the name. I think it's like Before Dawn, I think. There's a game that came out of a couple of years that literally the first scene is like, oh, boom, butterfly effect, whatever, because it's such a known phrase from that time. Yeah, until dawn, before dawn, life is strange. Yeah, life is strange too. Uh, rip. Anyway, um, what was I saying? Was her name Max? I think her name was Max. Yeah, Max and Chloe. Big rip. Anyway, but yeah, so this guy coined that phrase butterfly effect. In fact, well, I'll get to that in a moment. So he had rounded these numbers, and basically the idea is a tiny difference in your input will become a huge or major or significant difference in your output, right? So that becomes the phrase, and this is a sort of technical phrase. And if you studied, uh, differential equations or anything that has boundaries or like bounded conditions or initial conditions in general within physics, you'll know that that you'll recognize this phrase of initial conditions that are significantly impacted. Excuse me, the initial conditions of a system significantly impact uh, the rest of the system's behavior, right? I should put the camera over there because I keep looking over there. I might do that. Um, so yeah, so butterfly effect was coined from this uh from this I guess sort of discovery, right? Essentially, there's so many variables that go into weather patterns, and butterfly effect is a metaphor he had come up with trying to explain what describes a chaotic system or a super dynamical system, basically, which is the idea is that a butterfly flapping its wings in Texas may cause minor perturbations or tiny little, resonance in such a way that weeks later a tornado could occur just from the tiny flaps of that butterfly in Texas, right? It's a big exaggeration, or it can be, right? It's one of those things like one of those half jokes of like, oh, haha, I want to like as a student like, haha, I just want to Jump off a building, instead of take the test. So it's like half true because the sentiment is there and they're actually considering it, but like no, it's partially an exaggeration, right? Um, please don't jump off buildings. I'm not endorsing that. Um, sorry. um, so yeah, sorry. I'm. This slide says the same thing over and over again, but in many different ways, if that makes sense, right? Um, I hope this is making sense so far. So this slide is just to say what a definition of chaos is, and I straight up ripped this off of my senior design slides. Um, as you can see from like, oh, this was developed in the 1880s. Basically, this guy was looking at the three-body problem, which is basically if you have a using okay, so Newton did a bunch of stuff with gravity, and a lot of stuff that he did is considered classical mechanics. There's a problem that's studied even to this day, but granted there's more understanding of it, is that there's a called the three-body problem where there is a single body where there's three things around it, and using Newtonian what was it gravitational theory, uh, you can map the uh, paths at which each one of those bodies uh, revolves around the center. God, you can't see what I'm gesturing at. Okay, hold on. It's okay. It'll be better. It's better now. Don't worry. It's okay. It's not okay. I lied. I'm so sorry. This is fine. Much better. No, okay. Sorry. I get really distracted and I have no medication. So, oh well. So, I have no idea what I was talking about. Oh, so there's three bodies, right? There's three bodies all wrapped. I could just, I could just Google it real quick. Aha, this is it. This thing. Mapping the pathway of multiple bodies around a single point, right? If you look at each one of those paths, it's not as predictable as if you have a single thing rotating around a singular point. Does that make sense? This this seems very weird, and people in the 1800s were like, "What the heck is this?" Mapping out all these. Granted, they were calculating by hand in all these other ways, seeing the exact mapping. And even Newton himself, with the three-body problem, was like, "Oh, this gives me a headache," right? The guy behind gravity and all these other wonderful things. Dude behind calculus is like, "Man, this gives me a headache. I want to go to sleep," right? Right. So your boy Poincaré, I don't pronounce his name, has a little uh accent aigu, or the other one, the one that's like other side, um, on his E there. Anyway, he revolutionized a lot of physics. Anyway, he discovered chaotic systems. Thank you for the follow, Nor10. Hello. Um, I'm talking about chaos here. So, and I'm in the middle. Uh, so so yeah, this slide was just talking about what the definition of chaos is more formally, right before talking about implementing chaos. My gosh, there we go. I'm turning my entire second monitor, um, so that you can see my hands. I feel like while I'm gesturing, God, I need to capture this space, so I need like probably a stand. Um, but yeah, so chaotic actually does not refer to anything that's super random. It's actually not random at all. And I'll probably demonstrate that in a little bit, I suppose. So chaotic refers to something that is unpredictable, but also very deterministic, as in it has a set path of how it behaves, right? Chaotic systems, I've been hammering the second point a lot because it's very important. It's that it has high sensitivity to initial conditions. Um, and there's infinite responses to how like even the tight when it says infinite number of periodic responses, it's talking about it goes on forever, but it's not something that blows up as a result. I could probably explain that better, but I'll show it to you, I think, in a demo probably. Um, and Even though it has an infinite number of responses, it's not something that uh, it's not something that diverges, right? It's not something that blows up and then just, collapses in collapses in on itself or anything like that. So trajectories are bound. So that means it's something that you can observe as a finite phenomenon. This probably makes a lot of sense if you've studied anything in physics, and it probably makes no sense at all if you haven't. Um, I want to get better at explaining something that's really basic, right? So I had just explained what butterfly effect is, um, and it's basically something small makes a big difference, right? And everyone knows something along those lines, right? I probably should have put this slide first, which is basically explaining what a normal system, a classical system, this pendulum, that's the first problem you talk about in physics. Is like, oh, look, Newton's cradle, it just goes back and forth, these are the laws, whatever, right? And this is a single pendulum on the left side, right? On the right side is a double pendulum. Hello, Nathan. On the right side is a, it goes very well. I, I'm not sure I understand what is meant by if trajectories are bound. Okay. Um, Neither do I. No, hold on, let me think. I can probably explain that one better. I'm in the middle of a train of thought though, so I will go back in a moment. So first, this train of thought is that classical systems are very predictable. If you map this out, you're going back and forth, this is the path, right? If you have a double pendulum, which is basically one pendulum on top of another one, and you set it at a certain point, it will map a very weird projection, right? And if you make it slightly different to the side, to I don't know, point 0.1 whatever units to the right, it'll make a completely different path. It won't be shifted over by some amount. It'll be completely different. Like this entire curve will be completely different. Because of the small minor, they're called perturbations, but like minor differences, basically minor disturbances. Um, those minor disturbances grow, and then you just can't. It's not the same path. Even if it's slightly off, it's not even shifted by any means. We understand shifting by moving something around. It's something that's mapped behavior, but here it's completely random, even if you change it a little bit. Um, I'm pretty sure we spent like 10 seconds on this when I presented on it. So your question is talking about sensitivity to initial conditions only leads to chaos if the trajectories are bound. That's if the system does not, or it, that's the system itself cannot blow up to infinity. So what that means is if you have a system that is described by equations, it's you've taken Cal B, right? And Cal B is all about, or Cal 2, it's all about uh, determining whether or not series or derivatives or integrals, if you sum up a bunch of items, if they converge, right? Oh God, my webcam is so nice. You can see me in great resolution, but boy, does it not want to stand up. I'm gonna get a bunch of books and stand it up. I'm not gonna use a holy book though. Holy books are not a good thing to hold up. Okay, just gonna. I apologize. Okay, this looks terrible. Oh, now we can see my hands. This is great. This is terrible. This is okay. Yay. Um, Textbooks are the best camera stand, I agree, but I left them all in the other house. So I have a bunch of philosophy magazines I can use real quick. Ah, fantastic. Oh God, I'm gonna drop. So I inherited all these magazines. These are all. This is not enough. I might be right back to go get some textbooks. Okay, now you can hear me again. Sorry, I'm all over the part. This is terrible. This is okay. You know me, Nathan. I'm an innovator. Sorry, is it possible to reproduce the exact same path on double pendulum with the exact same in? Yes. So if you have exactly the same input, it behaves the exact same, right? If I go back to that GIF right here, and when it starts over again, it starts with that exact same path, right? If it's the exact same path, right? If we measure it at the exact position, as long as it's a spherical cow in a vacuum. That's a reference to something, and I forgot what it's a reference to. There's lots of memes on the internet these days. Sorry, by the way, Danny, did that answer your question? I think I got off track while I was describing it. If trajectory, so you study if things are diverge or not, right? Basically mapping out the behavior of a system or a equation or whatever, right? So I'm trying to think how to describe this better. I should have thought about this before. I just smacked this on there. I was like, this looks good. So, so actually, a quick way of visualizing what this refers to is something that we see a lot with attractors. And one of these slides, sorry, I'm going all the way. I mentioned at the beginning, I'm going like around in my slides. I'm not actually following them, because I just made them very quickly. Uh, So one thing I want to talk, you'll see a sort of bounded trajectory. You'll see it visually here with this slide about attractors, right? An attractor is something that's used a lot when describing chaotic systems. An attractor is basically a set of numbers associated with that system that tends towards some kind of, uh, I guess, mapped behavior, right? A set of numerical values that a system tends to evolve towards. Yeah, right. Our boy Lorenz made. You remember how I mentioned how his system had 12 variables and then he simplified it down to 3? He described what that was, and that became a fundamental, not equation, fundamental attractor is what the system's called now. A fundamental set of equations that describes atmospheric wind convection, I think, right? So Nathan says, for example, in Physics 1, when a ball rolls down an inclined plane, you ignore a bunch of stuff like drag against the wind. We ignore that the system loses energy to heat, a bunch of other stuff, etc. Yeah, we actually ignore a lot of different variables because those impact the reality a lot. And then the small differences within those impact each other, right? As long as this is oh. I mean, it's actually very applicable to this topic, though, as long as it's a spherical cow in a vacuum. Yes. Um. So two trains of thoughts. If you notice, I diverge very easily myself, so I'm clearly not chaotic at all. Um. They say engineers do not do too much approximating. They do. He's talking about a physics class. um. Pi equals E equals 3. That's my favorite uh, educational motto. So I was describing attractors, and attractors are essentially given a sort of a system in 3D space. This is a three-dimensional plot. If you notice this little GIF, it's showing Z and Y, and then it's moving it around. I have a bit of code up here actually that makes this type of visualization, and that's what I was messing around with right before the stream. But with a Lorenz attractor. If you look at it closely, it looks like a butterfly. Um, so yeah, this is what Lorenz's attractor. There's other attractors out there, and they're basically just sets of equations that are chaotic in behavior. And when I say chaotic, when I say chaotic, I mean that if you map out those functions starting at 0, and then you map its behavior around a three-dimensional, XYZ plane. It looks like this, right? In 3D space, this showing you as a 2D, you know, picture. It's moving around and all that, right? To show you the different X, Y, YZ, and XZ planes. But it has this specific mapped behavior. So going back to your question on bounded trajectories, when you plot this function, it doesn't go "Ooh," and then like shoot off to one side. It doesn't go like that, and it stays off in infinity. It doesn't do that, right? If it goes off to infinity, it's not bounded, right? If you go zoopy zoop into a little wibbly wobbly timey wimey little area here, something that goes back and forth, right? It's predictable and it follows a pattern, right? There's a bit more nuance here, and like part of this slide is talking about, an infinite number of unstable periodic orbitals, basically, going periodic, meaning it follows a pattern, right? When you think of a period, right? When you first learn about periods, well, I shouldn't say that. When you first learn about periods in math, uh, you have a sort of sine function, right? And a period is defined here because at this point it repeats, right? So if you have if you have a sort of behavior or wave like this and it repeats, it looks like this, right? It goes on the sort of path again, right? It's a repeating. So that's what we're talking about. A periodic orbital, it's just orbiting that same path, right? And unstable is just saying, well, it's not fixed, basically. I just licked my mic, I'm so sorry. So Nathan, you said they just double everything. If the math comes out that the bridge needs to hold approximately 10 tons, they'll build a bridge that can approximately hold 50 tons. Doesn't matter what approximations were made as long as they don't collectively throw the final off by a significant amount. ASMR stream. I mean, I was talking earlier um to one of my coworkers. My natural voice is actually very quiet. Like it's very quiet, and so if I whisper, it's actually very, very quiet. I feel like I could be a ASMR person. I come from a very loud family. Everyone teaches and everyone yells at each other, and whoever yells the loudest wins. And so naturally, I'm the youngest, and I also do not like yelling, so I always lose the arguments. So I always, so, but I feel like I can do both. So I can scream at you, and give you a hug, or I could whisper in your ear and run away from you. Sorry. Yeah, right. Well, you have siblings, right? I have siblings. Uh, in my culture, we go like, well, you know, um, whoever's the oldest gets to do uh the oldest gets the most trauma from the parents because they're the first, oh, we don't know what we're doing with this parenting stuff. So then that first child has to deal with it. So the next few people who are born are like, well, okay, this older person will take care of me because they have to learn the responsibility. They become a parent, right? So with enough iterations, you get to me, the youngest, and you have enough people that came before you. You have so many other parent figures, right? People who take care of you, right? Um, so naturally, the oldest would have the loudest voice amongst the children, and then it cascades down in terms of it follows downwards like the volume and in terms of loud voices. So I'm the quietest voice, but my oldest sister, she has a loud voice in general. Uh, this has been a lesson on uh, evolution and sibling dynamics. Parentification, yes, without having actual kids. Um, I don't know, growing up, you don't really pay taxes unless I guess you get a job when you're 16, I suppose. But you don't have to deal with all the other stuff of being an adult. Being an adult is Hard. That's crazy. I'm like slipping into it right now, and it's I made dumplings today because there's nothing else in my fridge right now. Anyway, sorry we got onto this topic. How did I get on this topic? Oh, voices and ASMR, and I licked my mic. Uwu dumplings. Uwu indeed. Thank you for your uwu. Um, no, but yeah, engineers they'll approximate a lot of stuff. And there's a saying, I learned this saying in school, is called good enough for government work. And that means basically it could be completely wrong, and someone who gets like a 30 on their test, they'll pass the class because hey, at least it's good enough for government work. Um, I shouldn't say that. That's disrespectful actually. But someone who gets a 60, let's say, a 60 is actually a failing grade or a D or a failing grade, right? Um, but if it if it doesn't kill anyone at the end and you used all your money and it's moderately feasible, you're good. Right? So good enough for government work. It's good enough for government work as long as the client doesn't know about it. Yes, that is correct. Not killing anyone is the bar I like to go with. Yes. I mean, if you make weapon systems, then it's a bit different because you're eventually going to be responsible for someone's death, but they don't like it when you break a contract. Yeah, they definitely don't. That's why you typically have meetings with those people to not strategize, to plan what changes you'll have in a project, right? I make a lot of weird faces, I guess, while I um so hey Danny, does that answer your question though about bounded trajectories? I feel like talking about attractors is probably a better way of visualizing what that means, right? Hello. Um, does anyone have any questions, by the way? I feel like I'm not gonna mention any of this to my advisor next Friday. I'll just say, oh yeah, you can. Okay, cool. I answered it. Um, so I had skipped over this slide, which is basically just showing a bunch of different chaotic systems all together. So these are all double pendulums, but if you notice, they all started around the same, say they all started very close to each other, but they're very slightly off. And that small difference makes a huge difference over time. I've basically been saying the same thing over and over again for like a little while now. Um, uh, I don't have that many more slides, but I want to talk about some applications in general because it's really nice seeing a lot of this stuff being defined. These are all dynamic as in changing systems, and they are uh repetition is important. Hell yeah. Um so yeah, so Nathan, I mentioned at the beginning I had a it's not really for a grade or anything like that. I have presentations with my advisor every couple of weeks, and I was going to present on a paper, and it mentioned it's how I'm doing a bunch of cybersecurity stuff. So that paper was talking about, well, we have these um we're transitioning to going into 5G networks, and we have to find a way that anonymizes the data sources and secures the communication, right? So secure as in what? Encrypts the channels that they're using, right? So one of the ways they did that is by using digital watermarking, and that to do that they used chaotic systems to describe the uh what's it called? They actually used a Lorenz system, to uh I'm blanking. They used a Lorenz system to basically act as a, I want to say key. I don't know. It's used somewhere in the process of making digital watermarks for uh, network traffic. It's a bunch of overhead and all this stuff. Anyway, I was going to present on that paper, but I didn't have time on Friday. And so I said a brief summary of it in 5 minutes, and my advisor said, "Oh, well, okay, I think you have to explain what chaos is next week because that seems interesting." And I'm like, yep, it seems interesting." And then you get into the math, and you're like, this is just fancy differential equations. That's basically what it is, right? Um, so yeah, this is not really academic, and I mentioned before, like I legit repurposed some of my senior design slides. Um, for my senior design, like this is a bunch of background info. Long story short, on this slide is essentially describing, hey, you can have. I mentioned on this slide that you can have circuits that have this behavior when you map it out, and so if you have a circuit and you have some voltage and stuff, you can control that voltage. You can theoretically control your behavior, right? Um, by throwing some more components into that circuit, right? So 1990 OGY, I think that's the O aught G Greg. Okay, I'm not gonna try. OGY method is basically a way of controlling UPOs, which is that thing we saw, UPOs of an attractor, whatever. Basically a way of controlling those things by using small little, like I said, perturbations or minor uh, differences, small little disturbances, basically, right? So that method became a thing. 2002. Those two people are actually in town, and I met them. So Dr. Koren and Dr. Pethel, so they came up with a way of controlling these chaotic circuits by something they call dynamic limiting. It's basic, like a lot of these words seem very complicated, right? Dynamic limiting, oh, the UGY, oh, the UPO, oh, perturbations. What's another one? I don't know. Diode limiter. A fancy way to say, hey, you just throw a diode in there and then you just twist a knob. That's basically what this slide is, right? Dynamic limiting, that's basically what we did, okay? Dynamic limiting is using a diode limiter. Diode is basically a component in a circuit that says, hey, I want current to go one way. It has a bunch of other properties, and you can learn about those properties in 3 or 4 classes, but that's basically what a diode is, right? Diode limiter is basically a bigger circuit. I technically have those pulled up um, somewhere else. To control the perturbations of a chaotic system in a chaotic oscillator, the limiter bounds, like because the bounding something is very important, right? You don't want it to go off to infinity. This limiter bounds the dynamic range of the oscillations, which is oscillations is something that basically goes back and forth. Oscillations to fixed voltage levels. So if something is fixed, that means it's not changing, right? All those things are kind of important because it shows that you are controlling the behavior of what you've created, right? So an example of that, um, so these are SPICE simulations, basically. If something is really oscillating, it just goes on like this forever, right? So similar to this little uh, picture where it's going back and forth forever. It goes through these many paths, and it's multiple different, I guess, paths. Not paths. I shouldn't say that. That's misleading. It's this guy on the left is a thick boy, okay? Um, and it has this behavior by itself with no change because small iterations of small changes are affecting this thing. But if you control the small iterations at each step and you basically change how it's generating that, you can control it and in such a way that the period looks less chonky on the right side. You see that says period 1 UPO? I think the one on the left is actually a period 77 UPO. Um, I can't tell you what the difference is actually. You would think that a 77 looks like that on the left where it's like thicker basically, and the one on the right it looks thinner, but I can't tell you a scientific way of why that is. I think searching on Google for a couple hours may give you a result. I thought of that question before, and I remember searching on Google, and I still couldn't find an answer. And then asking someone who knew about it, I got a big answer, and I still didn't know what it was. you know, so it's one of those things. I guess it started coming from me. I don't know. Granted, it's not my specialty. I used it. So this was actually part of my senior design. I forgot. I have a video saved on my phone. I forgot to transfer it over, but it was basically this. This is the output waveform. You take an oscilloscope. I don't think you do use that in physics. Might use it in physics. I can't remember. But yeah, this is the phase portrait plot is basically plotting its derivative versus its actual function. This x-axis is the normal function, or whatever describes that system, basically this waveform, and then the y-axis is its derivative. So this thing's derivative is plotted on the y-axis, and this is the phase portrait plot. I'm not going to talk too much about phase. So this is cool. We did this. The rest of this is actually the original paper presentation I was going to give. This is a lot of math, and I really liked all the math, right? So to answer your question from earlier, this is what the original presentation looked like. These were their results. It's a reproducible paper, but man, was it long. So one thing I was doing right before, and I was slightly late to 8 o'clock, was I was writing up code, and don't believe that I wrote any of this by myself. I searched a ton of things. Okay. Never mind. Can I reconnect? I may have to do this off screen. Hopefully it still works. Hopefully it still works. But anyway, there's a bunch of code. I can probably post this somewhere else. There's a bunch of code in, this is a tense, no one writes original code anymore. Yeah, that's correct, Nathan. And that's how I have a job. No, um, the thing is, I feel like a lot of people, they learn how to code and they kind of just don't code anything themselves. And I take that back. I want to validate your fields as well, is because you're hired to work wherever and you're just taking sections of code from Stack Overflow or Stack Exchange, or you're at the bottom of a bucket if you're getting code off of like Reddit or from Facebook. I've gotten code off of Facebook before. um, and um, you know what to take and you're piecing it together, right? Um, no one writes original code anymore. Original code is a myth. It's all been handed down to us from like ancient aliens or something. Danny, actually, the when you asked me about C sharp, like have you coded in C sharp? Um, my first introduction to C sharp was when I was, I think, in early high school, and I was just scrolling through Facebook, and someone I knew was he's older than me, but I don't know by how much. He's at least 2 or 3 years older than me. At least. He might be 4 or 5. He looks young. He posted his code on Facebook in C sharp. And then I read his code and I'm like, huh, this looks like Java. And this also looks like something else. Like, I don't know. It looked weird. And then I read through the comments because, I lurked on comments and like I didn't have friends on Facebook. I was just reading memes. Well, not memes. Some memes and then reading stuff on Facebook. Back in the early days of Facebook. Back in my day. No. And he said, oh, this is a C sharp piece of code that calculates taxes. And I'm like, that makes sense. Right? I don't like to hate on Java, but C Sharp is elite Java. C Sharp is Microsoft Java. If you like Microsoft, you use C Sharp. Just kidding. No one likes Microsoft, so that premise is false. But that does not negate the second portion of liking C Sharp. Like you can like C Sharp. It has some very interesting takes on it. You're a full-time Java developer. Well, at least it's not Microsoft. If it was Microsoft, I don't know how long you'd actually still be streaming then. Big F. I didn't know you actually code in Java. Yeah, it's just Oracle. It's so much better. I agree. Um, everyone just pieces together other people's work. That's correct. Java is a good boy. It doesn't deserve the hate it gets from the uninformed. Each language is good at certain things. I know a lot of people they see C. Okay, right. Like C is a good language to learn off the bat, and then C++ is like C with classes. And then a lot of people they go to Java and they go like, garbage collection. Now I don't have to deal with deallocating all my pointers and stuff, right? Which is nice. I actually want to try something real quick, and I don't know if this is safe to do on stream. It's probably okay. It's probably okay. I'll just delete it elsewhere. I guess you have, well, just have to deal with other BS. Yes, Bachelor's of Science. I guess you start with C as a computer engineer. At our program, yes and no. I think after you get through the weed out classes at the beginning, there's like when I came to college, there was a new class called computing for engineers, and they basically had man, they're dumb. Anyway, I shouldn't say that. They basically took all the engineers and they just shoved them into this one class and said, computing for engineers. You're going to talk about 3 programming languages. And I do this because one of them was MATLAB, one of them was Python, and then another one was Excel. Because I was the guinea pig group, we did MATLAB and Excel. We did not do Python at all because it was poorly planned and eventually someone made Python. Well, Python, slides and all that good stuff, but not me. So technically, I did not learn Python formally in college. I learned Python in 6th grade or 4th grade. I don't remember. I still have a book. I still remember from 6th grade that book by Al Schmish Shinsgard Gart. Al. Haha, Schwigart. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, one of these books. One of them. I don't know which one. He wrote a lot of books. Man, look at him go. Yeah, this book. I had this book when I was in 6th grade. It's an old book. I have this exact book. It's and now you too can own this book for only $4. No, but this exact book is what I had in 6th grade. I remember reading through it. I mean, like I didn't know anything, right? Oh, ah, I didn't know anything. And oh god, sorry. My mic is super sensitive, I feel like. So I hope it's fine every time I laugh and you hear like a gust of wind. I'm like super conscious about how I sound. Um, Partially because everyone yells, but also when you hear your microphone, you're like, man, that's what I sound like. Ew. I love my laugh though, but my microphone doesn't capture my laugh very well. Um, I do a good amount of Python too, just not as much as Java. But since like 90% of my job is fixing the code other people wrote 5 years ago, I don't get to touch Python as much. I feel that. I like that. That's a common experience too. That's a lot of software development, I imagine. I have no idea what I'm going to be doing at my job. It's just not going to be the same jank stuff I've been doing for a couple of years though. Which is actually I'll probably be doing more coding, more Python. Python is easy and it's terrible. As a computer engineer, I was trained to have all this intuition, and now I have this intuition, and then I have to use Python, and I'm like, oh my God, it's taking 2 seconds to run this code when it could take 20 clock cycles or 200 milliseconds instead of 2 seconds, right? There used to be a class, they don't do this anymore, but there used to be a class where one of the professors like says like you have to get within this amount of clock cycles. And someone I remember it's like one of those, old stories. I don't even know if it's true. It's probably true to be honest after dealing with the faculty. There's some guy who's like, "Oh yeah, I got it to, the requirement was like you have to be at 200 milliseconds." And that guy's thing ran for 20 minutes. Um so he did not pass that class, but I don't know. That was a big yeah, big yikes, big yikers. Um I don't know. I got really scared hearing all these stories from people who were like, people who go like, "Oh, I was supposed to graduate last year, but I failed this class, and this is the second or third time I'm taking this class." And the guy is smart and all. It's just that the class sucks, right? 20 minutes. Yeah. Well, I mean, like some code takes forever. Remember that story with Lorenz? He was like, "Oh man, I'm gonna just start in the middle and then just take a coffee break and talk to all my friends." Just kidding. He's a scientist, so he's just talking to himself in the mirror for 20 minutes. I guess I don't know. He says coffee break. He probably went to the bathroom, to be honest, and then probably lied about it when he went and talked about it in an interview, right? I don't know. Would you rather say like, yeah, I went to go get a cup of coffee, and then on my way back, I was like, oh, or on when I got back, it was like this discovery, or would you say, oh no, I wanted to go take a dump, and then I came back, and then I saw this discovery. Like, a cup of coffee sounds better, right? Um, 20 minutes though is not. I guess 20 minutes is a long time. Uh, it's definitely a long time if you're using C. It's not that long of a time if you're using Python because Python is super inefficient. Compiler is written in C, and that's nice. A lot of stuff ties up a lot of good stuff for you because it's all in C in the background or under the hood. But you don't have to declare ints or shorts or anything, but you just take your data and you just shove it into something that's the biggest type of data. It's the biggest one. You just shove it in there. You got a character? Who cares? Put it in the same spot. Um, no, Python's really inefficient, or it can be. It is good for readability though, and that's one of the things you study in programming languages, right? Um, I have a generally diverse background, I think. A lot of people they took a lot of CS classes as their concentration. I took a lot of math classes, math and electrical engineering. I say a lot, but a few. Anyway, I'm not going to click this. I hope that it's still mounted. This is mounting my personal drive so I can save stuff. If I click through all these different things, it's basically setting up a Lorenz system. This is Lorenz's system, right? So if I don't think Control N will be nice because I'm holding the whole window. Yeah, Lorenz attractor. If I go to images, um, okay, wait, this is not what I want. So the system is described like this, right? You can ignore the numbers. It's described basically you have a constant A, constant B, constant C, right? And this is the sort of behavior that is described, right? I like this illustration actually. It goes, oh God, if you look at it for too long, the dashed line looks like it's moving. Do you see that? If you look at the black line and then you move your eyes, it looks like the dashed line is moving. At least it does for me. It's a still image, optical illusion. Anyway, so I wanted to show this. This is Lorentz equation, right? So taking that, you code it in, you give it that, and then you plot it for like a certain portion. And you plot. Well, this is making those arrays, and then this is actually plotting it, right? So if I click das and make good image, it do good. So that is in 3D space what that Lorenz attractor looks like, right? From this angle, we see all three dimensions all at once. So naturally, if you see something three-dimensional and you move your head, you move around, you see a different angle, right? Um, I One of my friends that I don't know if they're in chat or they're just viewing on the side because they don't I don't know if they still have access to their account. Anyway, I was talking to one of them about how there's a lot of stuff you learn in science and STEM and engineering and math and all these other fields, as well as other fields, not just STEM, within music, within history, within a lot of other things. A lot of the stuff in a lot of the humanities you learn on pen and paper. You learn a lot of sentences that are, statements of fact. This happened in this year, and it was caused by this, this, and this, and then whatever. I'm using history as an example, right? And music, you have these different compositions, and they sound wonderful, etc., right? And it may have a it may have an effect on you, a psychological feel, a physiological, whatever, and then there's all this other science going behind the scenes for that, right? This was a big tangent. What I meant to say originally is that lots of things in science and STEM, I feel like you could also apply to your life in different ways than you may have originally anticipated. And like some things that we see in nature and we've described in certain ways and we've made applications for, you could also make those applications to yourself and your life and things around you, right? So an example with this is like just like small, and I kept thinking about this actually while I was making slides while I was studying this a while ago as well. Is that, and I meant going on this topic because a moment ago I was saying, oh, this is three-dimensional space. So naturally, a lot of people, they may want to see it in X, Y plane, X, Z plane, a single, a single slice of what this image is, by, rotating it, right? Or taking a specific viewpoint. So what's the equivalent? If I have an object, oh, well, endorsing Georgia Tech. No, if I have an object and I see it a certain way within 3D space, right? I have a certain angle. Because I have this angle, I can look at it and see all the three dimensions. But if I rotate the object or I move myself, I see it in a different view. You can apply that to seeing any other person's point of view, right? If you are looking at this and your friend is looking at this in a different angle, you can look at it in different ways. I don't know. That's a very abstract way of thinking, I guess, but that's what I keep thinking about when I see certain elements within STEM. Another one is, I keep talking about small initial conditions. It's really hot in here because there's a server in here and the door's closed. Okay. The small initial conditions change everything, right? Same with your life, small tiny things. If you change them very slightly, everything could be much different, right? Every small decision you take can have huge lasting impacts. So that's like, that gives me anxiety. Holy crap! Like there's so much uh, instrumental freedom, right? Um, if you study different philosophies, especially post 1940s, or you study existentialism, there's lots of emphasis on people's freedom. We are burdened to be free, as I can't pronounce his name. Sartre says, he says we are burdened to be free, right? Or Sisyphus going up the mountain, we must imagine him happy, right? Uh, with all of our freedom, we have this terrifying realization that we are 100% responsible for ourselves, and every small thing that we do may build up to a habit, to something that collapses us, something that gives us something great at the end, etc. Right? And then small things that may happen to us in our lives may be those small perturbations, right? Um, and you can extrapolate a lot of this out, and not extrapolate, you can abstract a lot of this out, and it's been applied to several different ways of thinking, right? A lot of what I described as chaos, it's predictable, deterministic. It's not predictable necessarily, it's unpredictable actually. It's not random, it's deterministic. So if the universe is chaotic, if it has like great entropy, then that means the universe is deterministic, right? A lot of this may tie into multiverse theory, where if you have this, if you had a Big Bang or something, you had original point of the universe, and you just had different initial conditions, it just span out to something completely different, right? And you could have that exact moment any moment of the day, and we don't know how often. I think I watched a lecture on this like a while ago. One of the lead what's it called, SME, subject matter experts, was talking about this, and they have a book, and they were talking about, oh well, multiverse theory uses a lot of chaos, blah blah blah, but basically small little things diverge, not diverge, but there's a version of you that is slightly different. It's a version of you. It's not you because they don't have the same experiences and all that. I'm going on this huge tangent. No one's catching me. Come on. This stemmed from me saying, oh, anything in STEM you can apply to your actual life, right? I hope that tangent uh was fun. Is anyone still here? I don't know how to check how many people are watching. I don't know how to do that. That's okay. Um, so we have these pictures. I should have shown these next, but we have these pictures too. Um, nice pictures. This is me saving it into a folder. Lots of folders in this directory. Um, I could probably link to this somewhere. Someone has this on GitHub, and I basically took it line for line and then made a few changes so that if I save something to a uh, a drive, it stays there essentially. Um, and then I saved it as a GIF or GIF here. So if you start with a certain point, this is a simple animation for that. Starting in one point and then moving forward, right? A little point. It starts here and then it goes into a little, basically like a curvature, and then it keeps expanding onward from there. I've been talking for a long time. Ah. So as you can see, I keep go, and I keep go. Oh, that's cool. And just gets darker over time. So this is, I think, maybe 200 different PNGs all stringed together. Um, Streaming is interesting because multiple people are all, uh, they all see that. Um, so I think that's mostly of what I wanted to talk about. This animation can go in the background, and this was what I was working on right before. My senior design was using all this stuff. I got a paper out of it, so I had it pulled up just to look at it. This is what that chaotic circuit actually looks like in that senior design project that we did. We were basically controlling it, yeah, OGY here. I have different hardware. This is the phase portrait. Here's the diode limiter, bunch of components. Basically, you throw that into a circuit. You just throw this into a black box, throw it in the circuit, control it. There you go. Um, so yeah, this is on ResearchGate. Uh, and that's the voltage limiter. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but this is my paper that we got a while ago, and um, I have a better video of this, but I don't have it like it's on my phone, and I don't have the right adapter with me to actually share it, I suppose. Um, Excuse me. Do any of you have questions? Hello. I the thing is, if no one asks a question, I could very well ramble for a long time. And I had started this presentation saying, "Yo, if you don't know anything, not if you don't know anything, if you don't know what's going on or anything, then just let me know. I can talk about some things." Yeah, I didn't mention much of these applications. I should talk about it, I suppose, here as well. So these systems in general, they're defined. So the one that we just saw had three variables, right? And that's already simplified, super simplified, right? So if you have multiple more variables for something that's much more complicated, like especially in economics, where a lot of things are affecting the market, you can have much more complicated, complex attractors and systems and things like that, and you can study those types of things, study the pathways, and then using that predict like a certain point in the path, right? If you know what a tractor's behavior is, you can map whatever behavior, whatever uh, future value it may have based on that. Um, a lot of applications also deal with, like we saw with weather, with Lorenz, cryptography is what I had described. You can use, and I guess this is probably fundamental within chaos, and that's how um, I would use it as well, is that so chaos, it's something that's dependent on initial conditions, and a rising problem that we're having for multiple applications of this in cryptography actually. One of the rising things that we're having in general is, well, I have these small microprocessors, right? And these microprocessors are limited by how much processing power they have. And doing a lot of encryption takes a lot of resources for your processor, right? It takes up a lot of usage, power, it takes up time, processing time. I think one of the biggest things is the amount of time it takes to encrypt something and then decrypt it on the other side. And if you're doing this with multiple different I'm saying devices, but I mean IoT, Internet of Things. All your smart devices. I'm calling them devices because it could be a computer, a phone, your doorbell, your refrigerator, your webcam, your computer itself, your phone. I don't know if I said your phone or your computer. It could be all these different smart devices that are connected in a network, and uh, you're encrypting stuff, passing them in between each other. That's a lot of overhead, right? If you're calculating things out, right? One way to get around passing cryptographic keys, long story short, for cryptography is basically you're passing a key, you do a thing, and then someone has a key somewhere else that they can unlock it. And it could be the same exact key or it could be a different key. That's basically the two types of cryptography, symmetric and asymmetric. Um, so one way to go about doing this is if you have a physical unclonable function. So that's something that's actually, instead of software based where it's a bunch of numbers, you have something physical make a change. Something physical defines something for our usage, right? So a physical unclonable function, a PUF, defines something that is unique to a specific device. That's how you make a key, right? A key is unique to a device when it's communicating, right? I had to make sure that I'm still talking. Yes, I'm still talking. Um, so you generate a key uh, using a physical, as in something on the physical item, unclonable, meaning another item that does the same thing will not get the same result. It's unclonable, right? Function. So it's just function. So sort of mapping, doing this with your device while it's like the shaking, while it's producing this mapping will change it, right? Um, so you use your initial conditions for a device, and you say, okay, well at this time it has these three parameters. It's going to create this mapping, and that mapping will generate a key for an actual cryptographic application or something like that. That way the key doesn't even have to be stored. It doesn't have to be stored in memory at all. You just use whatever mapping you have, make a key at that moment, toss it out immediately after you encrypt the item, right? Assuming something on the other end can decrypt it, right? Sorry, that's a complicated subject, kind of, right? That's the subject of this paper down here, right? This paper uses chaotic digital watermarking, and that's basically how they use it. They use a chaotic system as a PUF. PUFs are used all over the place in terms of hardware cybersecurity or hardware security or supply chain security. Uh, um, PUFs are used a lot for like determining whether or not you have counterfeit devices as well. Um, I'm giving out a lot of these terms, and you can Google them as you please and things like that. A lot of it's very interesting, and uh, some of this, a lot of this stuff is going into security, and like not just this, a lot of other topics are also going into security because the world is changing very quickly, and so are malicious people, right? We see a lot more cyber attacks day to day, and they just keep growing. So there's a lot of interesting stuff being implemented in security these days, including things like this. It's out there, but the application is there. It may not be immediately feasible, but you can definitely use it. Predictive maintenance, biology, populations, those are just complicated subjects. Another topic within cryptography is, or in general, is if these are all pseudo-random paths, because you're determining it by using a seed or initial conditions at the beginning to dictate your behavior. You can make a random number generator based off of a chaotic oscillator, a circuit or something similar to it, right? Um, so those are all applications. Simulations includes the stuff that I talked about here, and then I also gave this little demo. It keeps going. Yep, there it goes. I think it's catching up because it's going much faster now. I think it's catching up to what it was before. Yeah, there it goes. Yeah, it's much faster because it's all reloaded in cache. Okay, so I think yeah, this is much longer than I thought it would be, but that's okay. It's fine. Don't worry. I hope you all learned something, and if there are no questions, I'll end up here. God, I sound like my dad. If there's no questions, I will end up here. All right. Well, I hope everyone has a good day, good night. Um, and I will probably talk about another subject another time. Probably maybe security or um, reverse engineering. I like talking about different specifics of subjects, but I like broad ones as well. Um, I don't know. I can talk a decent amount about philosophy, like existentialism. That's one of my favorites. We'll see, but I will end here. Okay, bye-bye.